Do you think AI is a threat to developer jobs?
Not at all. Not at all.
Hello, and welcome to Senior Code Review Buddy. My name is Chris, and today I've got another episode of Fireside Dev Tips to share with you. This time, I'll be talking with Kyryl from Kyryl Opens ML. I've known Kyryl for a number of years, and he seemed like a great person to have on as my first real guest. One area that he's got a lot of interesting experience to share is in the realm of machine learning, as he's not only worked on a lot of projects around machine learning, but he's worked with a lot of different companies on machine learning projects. Of course, instead of me explaining things, it's probably better if I just start the interview and let Kyryl do his own introduction. Enjoy. Thank you for taking some time out today to just have a Q&A with me and just chat about some stuff. So to start, could you introduce yourself and tell me just a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chris. So my name is Kyryl. I founder and ML engineer in company called Kyryl Opens ML.
Good name.
Yeah, very, very humble. Where I basically, it was my wife's idea, so I'm rolling with this. Where I basically teach people ML engineering, and I have my own course called ML in Production, which is, say, hardcore course if you want to get into ML engineering, ML ops, and software engineering from ML point of view. And apart from this, also do some consultancies for VC, for startups, for companies, and trying to combine this mix of education and consultancy. And before that, I spent my last 3 years working in Canadian VC firm called Georgian, where I worked with Georgian portfolio companies on a different aspects of ML journey, from hands-on implementation to helping them with strategies, helping with forming, hiring, creating ML teams, and also on diligence side, trying to understand like, okay, should we invest in this company or in that company, and then post-investment build ML product with those companies. And yeah.
Quick question on that. How many different companies do you think you worked with over the years there?
Yeah, that's a nice question. I usually say like 40 plus, but
Oh,
hands-on, oh no, that's like 40 plus just in general in the Georgian portfolio. I think hands-on close to 15 were like actually hands-on project when I actually go inside of the code base, deploy something, change something. I think it was, let's say, 3 companies in a year, so it's close to 10. But there is a big aspect of just consultancy and strategic advice. So I would say close to 15.
that is a lot of different code bases to be able to see in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, that was a lot of learnings and a lot of you always try to find like a common ground between each of them and like also try to reuse, but diversity and spectrum was quite large.
Did they mostly use the same languages and frameworks, or was it like kind of all different?
It was all different. So for ML specifics, it was mostly Python.
Okay, yeah.
So at least that was common, but in all other aspects, that was completely zoo of different tools and frameworks and different use cases. Infrastructure wise, it still was mostly AWS, little bit GCP, but framework wise, tool wise, backend languages wise, it was all different. No single one's the same.
Okay. I guess one last question to start following up on this stuff. You
No
said,
one.
lots of Azure or AWS, sorry, lots of GCP. Was there much Microsoft Azure, or did that not really get
Not
used?
really. I don't know if it was a bias or Azure is not so popular. Um, there's definitely was, so most of the companies were B2B. So there was some
Mhm.
customers who wanted to do Azure stuff, but I know 80% is AWS, 15% GCP, and only 5% was mix on-prem plus Azure.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, yeah, no why.
Okay, well that's yeah. Thanks for giving us some detail about sort of where you got started. I guess the one I'll ask one more leading question related to that. So like, what was the company you worked at before? George and yeah, how do we know each other?
Oh yeah, yeah. Before Georgian, I worked in a company called Borealis AI, where I have a pleasure to work with you as my manager, and where I learned tons of different stuff, especially about like how to run engineering projects and importance of design documents. And to be honest, this is what I teach in my course right now, is that like every time you should start from a design document. And I remember exactly the problem we try to solve with design document and why it becomes so important. Yeah, but I worked in Borealis AI before, which was subset of RBC. I guess formally we were RBC employee, even that
Yeah,
Borealis has its own CEO, CTO, infrastructure, etc. It's still broader umbrella of Royal Bank of Canada.
yeah, it was an interesting experience there. Sort of not quite. I think all of us realizing that we'd be working for a bank as opposed to maybe a machine learning research
Yeah,
institute. Little
yeah,
little
yeah.
culture difference between the groups. All right. I think that's a good sort of explanation of the different things you've done. I guess what's a sort of memorable coding project you've worked on, maybe at one of these locations or, one at university or just anywhere else?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them, a lot of memorable one. Maybe one of the most recent and one of the most large scale was with one of the Georgian company. It was public company at the time, and still public right now. And that was basically a from huge migration of one ML architecture to another one. They used to build the company on top of CNN, convolutional neural networks, and they wanted to migrate to BERT,
Oh,
which
okay.
is completely different architecture. They get a lot of bump in the accuracy and performance, but the issue was the scale that we have to migrate almost 2,000 accounts from the CNN to BERT, and the computational demand was just increased by so much, and the code base was old, and the product was for lawyers and lawyer firms. So that was a very long run in migration, which took us almost 2 years. From simple hackathon, we said like, oh, what if we're going to migrate from CNN to BERT, to actual migration and shadow deployment and managing all clients to a new architecture. That was, I think, one of the most large scale, I would say, impactful, interesting project I worked there.
Now, when you say the old, I guess, code was old, how old is old?
Yeah, it depends. I think I like this question because even right now, if I read paper, if it's from 2022, usually discounted by a lot, because how much which is it's an old paper. Um, yeah, I think some of them. So some of this code base were like around 5 6 years old.
Okay, not too bad.
So it's not too bad. Yeah, it's not that like you have to support like S3, which is 17 years old or something.
Mhm.
But given how fast everything developed in ML and ML engineering, I can give example. For example, the BERT was implemented from scratch on top of the PyTorch instead of using Hugging Face transformer libraries,
Hmm.
which, to be honest, quite a big deal, because most of the development is happening right now on top of transformers, and with their most optimization is happening right now. And it was also part of the migration we have to do, because not a lot of people right now do NLP on pure PyTorch. They usually use some kind of high-level wrappers or high-level libraries like transformers.
Okay, so it sounds like mostly the challenges were just sort of the machine learning space has moved so much as opposed to like having to upgrade Python 2 to Python 3 kind of stuff. Just more like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
domain changed a lot.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Okay. I guess going to like Python 2, Python 3, what was the first programming language you learned?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I think the first. Not that I learned it, but the first programming language I experienced was, I think it's called Pascal.
Oh, that was
I
the first
think.
one I learned too.
Yeah, yeah. Like, and I get exposure to it from university basically. My like assignment from a programming class were like in a Pascal. Um, so it was Pascal and then C. Those one I got first exposed in university, and I think I love that it was C because even that I never code and C in industry experience, in industry setup, but just this low level understanding of that, oh, actually it's not just Python and print hello world, it's something deeper, it's compilation, it's by give you like a much solid foundation. So Pascal and C were the first one I experienced, but I never use them in industry settings. In industry settings, it was Python and Golang,
Oh,
my
okay.
first exposure.
So you said that you sort of learned the Pascal in university. Does that mean that's you only started programming in university?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know, like I didn't have a computer in my school years, so I think I start getting to programming only in universities.
Oh, what interested you in like getting involved in programming at university then if you hadn't been previously exposed?
Yeah, that's a good question because I even not study programming. I study math,
Ah,
and I'm like a master of mathematics or whatever like mathematics field you speaking about. But at that time, to be honest, I got into programming because I used to live in a student hostel, and all three of my roommates, yeah, back in Ukraine, there's four people living in one small tiny room, which was quite fun experience at the time. Were software engineers, and somehow I just get into it just to fit in and start programming as well.
I think what you've described is peer pressure. Yeah, yeah.
It's like peer pressure, yeah, yeah, like
But a
like
positive
you
one, maybe.
some people start smoking because of like there's people around us, like I start programming.
There are many worse things you could have picked up as a habit. So I guess that's
Yeah.
not too bad. But that's interesting. I guess sort of learning from that kind of like base. I guess what's one skill related to programming, or I guess just anything in general that sort of you had wished you kind of learned sooner. Like it seems like a little bit of a different path than other people I know.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, I think, very specific to my own experience and my IT background, where my software background that I'm coming from. But if I name the one skill I would love to learn way before, maybe 5 years before, because I do programming for like 10 years. Maybe I learned the skill only like on a year number 7 or 8. It's basically, it's even non-technical skill. It's speaking with business people, like
Mm.
understanding that there is not only technicality and engineering in the programming. There is a business side of things. Almost like if I narrow down, like just try to learn how to read profit and loss statements for your company if you have access to, and then try to relate how your low level programming contributing to it. Maybe you would not be able to do this, but just establish this connection between that whatever you code then somehow show it in those numbers. So, but generally speaking, yeah, it's speaking with business folks and understand that there is a business side of programming, that whatever marvelous engineering child you creating matters for business and how they connect it. Because I think I haven't thought about it for a very, very long time. And it's specific for me because this is how usually software companies set up back in Ukraine, where I'm from, is that you get a very detailed spec what's need to be done, and you're trying to implement it in the best possible way from
Mm.
engineering perspective. While specs might be wrong, and you need to understand the business side of the stuff and then adjust and select right thresholds.
I think that's a great answer, and I would say that I've that's a thing I would agree with. That like I think you got to understand what the code's going to be used for. But I don't think I've ever thought before of like making sure you can connect it to like the profit and loss statements because like that is true. Like at the end of the day, the reason most businesses exist, especially in like the venture capital space, is to make a profit eventually. So you do kind of have to connect to that and make sure it works. It's not
Yeah.
always just is the code fun and technically cool.
Especially right now, I think like with a tough environment and with tough economy, I think people speak less about mission and vision and speak more about returns and efficiency. And maybe we'll get back to this free money flow with cut interest rates. But right now, everyone becomes much more pragmatic and looking at numbers. And yeah, the first goal of every company is to make money. And then if you're making money, you can do something else.
Mhm.
Um, and if you can understand how your work connected with revenues or losses, if you reduce losses into your company, that would be a huge advantage.
Yeah, yeah. I guess so. You mentioned sort of you didn't learn that till about 8 years in. Was that something that you learned and then helped you become a senior developer, or like how did you reach becoming a senior developer in this space? Like what do you think were the things that helped you do that?
Yeah, I didn't remember the exact point when I become a senior developer. It just somehow happened organically. Um, but I think one of the biggest shift when I start thinking about myself as a senior developer is that it actually was the first time when I got laid off.
I did
Which
not
is
see that coming. All right.
yeah. So I work in a small outsource company and with amazing tech lead was like just he was like amazing. He's right now staff engineer at Google, get all money in the world. So like amazing guy. And he was my tech lead at that time, and I learned like tons useful stuff from him. And the project was closed at the time because company went bankrupt, and the whole team got laid off. Um, and we already all found the different jobs at the time. And that was my first transition from software engineer to ML engineer, because I used to work as a software engineer before, and I found the ML engineering job, uh, which I never done ML in production before. I get mass education, but I just take courses, done some tutorials, and I was the only ML person there. And my tech lead at the time said to me like, "Oh, Kyryl, it's actually good and bad that you're going to be the only one ML person. It's bad because yeah, like you need somebody for review, you need guidance, etc. But it's good because you will learn to be responsible because there is nobody else to back you up if something bad happens. If
Mm.
software doesn't work, if system is not responsive, it's your fault and your task to figure out." And at the time I was like quite relaxed starting this new job, after this word I was like, oh my god, like I'm really going to be the alone person who going to develop model, who going to deploy it and support them. And I remember that, and this is my first ML job, and I
Hmm.
was like little bit terrified, but I think that's taught me sense of ownership and sense of responsibility, which I think makes this transition from junior to senior. So it even doesn't matter like your technical capabilities. Technical capabilities would grow in any way if you just in the field for a while. But the sense of ownership is, I think, what makes you transit from more junior to more senior role.
So do you think that's a common mistake you then see amongst intermediate and junior developers is that they don't have that sense of ownership, or is there something else that you've seen that you think maybe is a bigger blocker in general?
I think sense of ownership is one of the most important one because you still can be junior technically wise, but if you responsible and own the system, you would grow much faster, even faster than much more technically superior peers. I think the second obstacle is kind of related to this, but it's going end to end. And I had this issue as well, that for a very long time I thought like I'm doing APIs only,
Hmm.
I'm exposed, and now it's not my problem. Yes, I'm responsible for
Uh,
API, but here's the endpoint. It works. I don't care. Or in case of data scientist, it might be, here's my model, it performs well on the test settings, here's the code, I don't care what happens. Not that we all of course care, we all try to do our best, but if I exaggerate this point. And that kind of mentality also blocks you from growing, because you should not be afraid to go end to end. And even if it's something not in your responsibility, still going end to end and still understanding how to work infrastructure, how to work front end, whatever client, it's either mobile or UI or web UI your user used to access your product, it's extremely important. So sense of ownership and willingness to go end to end from infrastructure layer to client layer. You don't have to be an expert in this, but you should understand and troubleshoot it end to end. That's what makes you amazing senior developer, and what's prevent you from becoming senior developer if you don't want to go very deeply in this point.
I think you're very consistent with your things, because yeah, I can definitely see like end to end connects very nicely with sort of that full ownership where you're really owning the whole thing. And that also connects very nicely to, can you connect to the profit and loss statements or how the business overall is doing? Because yeah, if you just release the API, it's like, okay, the business needs that, but generally businesses aren't just an API being exposed. There's usually more stuff around it than that. So I think you're hitting a couple of points that all kind of are they line up very nicely together. About like, it's this clear ownership helping drive the business and being able to do these great things that I do. Yeah, I would agree. I think those make good senior developers.
It's one point of view. You can argue with this, right? You can say, because there is a second point of view that, oh, maybe I'm for example, a CUDA driver person. So you might go very deeply into one specific topic and become absolute best-in-class expert into one narrow field. That's definitely path, not my path, not for me, not the one I specialized on. It's definitely an option. My preferable way, and there's some people who are extremely successful in doing this, but my preferable way is to go end to end and understand how it works together with business.
Okay. I guess sort of moving on from that, sort of, is there a common mistake you see in sort of all developers that, or, is there a common mistake that you make often that you're like, you kind of know you should be doing better, but you still haven't gotten that one all the time?
Yeah, I mean, other than laziness.
Now, when you say laziness, what do you mean by laziness?
Laziness is basically trying to cut corners and then paying later on for this. There is good laziness and bad laziness. So I think this is more like a bad laziness, when you cut corners and then pay later on. And good laziness is when you optimize your stack so you don't have to do several things multiple times. So maybe some kind of laziness, or what I recently found is, and why I love to work with interns and folks only start doing stuff, because they kind of don't know rules. They don't know what's possible or not possible, and they can deliver amazing results because their ignorance is kind of their superpower.
They try it because they don't know they shouldn't.
Yes. We done it not because it's easy, but because we thought it's easy. So exactly this mentality. I found that I sometimes works to reinforce this in me, and maybe like not go with status quo. That, for example, Docker is amazing tool, but maybe you need to write your own container orchestration, and maybe you should go against it. Not that you should write your own containers, but just as a one example.
So you haven't considered writing your own competitor to Docker?
No, but I'm using one startup who did exactly this.
Oh.
And I love it.
What's the name of the startup?
It's a model lab. They do all this different stuff, but they don't use Docker. They have their own runtime implementation on top of containers.
Oh, neat. I'll have to get the link from you for that.
Yeah,
put it in the description. Okay. One thing I wanted to go back that you talked a little bit about is you mentioned that you'd been a software developer and then you became a sort of machine learning engineer. What's the difference between those two roles?
In ideal world, there should not be any difference because in my
Ooh.
ideal world, everyone should know machine learning and should be able to build a ML-based product because I believe that there's going to be no non-ML-based product. ML should be present in any of your product in somewhere larger, somewhere smaller extent. So in my ideal world, there shouldn't be any difference. This is not the case. In reality, there's a huge difference. And there is a different roles like software engineers, ML engineers, there's a MLOps, there is a data scientist, there's a AI engineers trying to be introduced. I think I'm using those buzzwords as well, but I believe those are buzzwords. And if you're a good software engineer, you should do all of this together. But in a conventional answer, I think software engineer is the one who built software in a classic sense, deterministic systems, maybe some large scale. ML engineer, in a, again, conventional wisdom, is someone who takes the output of data scientist and build also software system, but around this model, basically deploying models like GPT-4,
Mhm.
O1, Llama 3, you name it.
Okay. I guess hearing that you think, all engineers should be able to do ML stuff, I think that can be maybe intimidating and overwhelming for people. Like ML is a very large subject. Are there resources that you'd recommend, like if someone has, come out of a boot camp and they kind of want to, like, they're, we'll say, more classical engineer and they want to get into ML or figure that out, like, how would you recommend people start that?
Yeah. So I mean, on a self self topic that I'm this is exactly the point of my course. This is what I
Mm-hmm.
teach. My main audience is either data scientists who want to become really good ML engineers or software engineers who want to go and beyond ML engineer, built on top of their software skills. So this is what because my way of thinking that all software engineers should be ML engineers. This is what I'm working towards with my course.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to take this path. You can just try to think how you can add ML component into your product, and with those LLMs, those extremely easy to add and extremely easy to do. My sense and my way is that like more systematic way because my course is like for 2 months, very involved, very hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
How I would love I being told when I was a software engineer to go into ML. There's more different ways of doing this as well. And on a point that it's intimidating, I would say that ML should become like almost like a database skills. Like every
Mm-hmm.
software engineer knows how to work with database, right? It's basically one-on-one of software engineering. You need store data, you need to retrieve
Mm-hmm.
data. And databases are amazing in a large area by itself. And you don't need to be like a database performance optimization engineer to work with databases.
True.
Exactly same logic with ML.
So what I'm hearing is ML is just another database, really, and it'll be nice and easy. No major challenges.
You can like there's a joke that like overfitted ML is a database, and the ChatGPT is basically compiled database of all human knowledge, which is quite extraordinary that we can put all not all but huge chunk of human knowledge in like 10 gigabytes of compressed weights of a neural network. But yeah, I look at this in the same way. You know what the select, you know what the insert, and you know what the index is. That's quite basically like your basic database literacy. The same idea with ML. You should know what's the model, how to train, how to evaluate. And if you work with them enough, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper with optimizing different databases, scale them. Same story with ML.
That's a good point. I guess then related to that, do you think AI is a threat to developer jobs?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that LLM-based products are one of the best things happens with software engineering for a long time, because it's I use it all the time. I just get my quota for O1 because I ran out of all my messages yesterday, and it's never been pleasant. And you kind of like skip all boring parts to those models and do only interesting, curious parts they cannot solve. So I think that's not a threat at all. Of course, like all crypto bro and big part of Twitters would say is that AGI is scheduled for 2025, etc. That's not the case, at least not in the current architectures and paradigms of ML. And it's still good copilots, and it just make programming more enjoyable, more easy to do, and more people going to do it, and more software going to be created. So demand would grow. It's similar with DevOps engineers. When Amazon introduced clouds, everyone said like, yeah, we don't need admins anymore. We can manage everything by just clicking everything in the AWS console. And here we go. We have DevOps, we have security engineers, we have S3, you name it. Similar with AI. So it's not a threat. I think it's a much pleasant improvement for everyone who is doing programming right now.
Because what IDE do you generally work in with your Copilot?
I actually quite old school here. I use just
Emacs?
normal. No, not so it's called, not so it's called. But I would love to sync with my brain. No, on VMs I usually use just plain VM. No, on my desktop I use VS Code with a
Oh, okay.
bunch of custom plugins, and so it's a VS Code, it's a wrap as a terminal, and it's desktop ChatGPT.
Oh, okay.
Just basic one. I try to use Claude, but to be honest, I so much used to ChatGPT, and they release all one model, and it's my wife is using ChatGPT, so it's kind of like we have a team plan. So, and I love the conversation interface, because it's not only about code, it's also just about like brainstorming ideas, and especially with those new models. So it's a VS Code, warp as a terminal, and just desktop ChatGPT.
Okay. So I've got one last question for you now. A little unrelated to the other ones we've had, but if you could learn one programming language, framework, or tool, which one would you pick and why?
Yeah, so I'm actually learning right now. I'm learning Rust
Oh,
as
that's
a
what I want to
new.
learn next.
Yes. And I think why, because I'm most of my career coding high level languages like Python, Golang, Java. I never code something like on a system level language like C or C++, and I see Rust as a logical extension of those languages. Plus, there's a lot of signals from ML industry which you almost cannot ignore, that most of the high performant ML inference right now is done in Rust. Remember, when there is a GPT-O come up, there is an open source version of LLM model you can speak with your voice, and it's almost real time, and the implementation is in Rust. So every time there is a high performant, fast ML inference, there is somehow Rust involved in some capacity, and this is growing and growing over years. So that's the language and tool you would say I would learn right now.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's also the one that interests me for similar reasons, where I keep hearing about it in different spots, and it's like, okay, I keep hearing it. It's probably worth investigating, because it's been years that I've heard about it, and like it just keeps seeming to gain more and more hype. Well, those were all the questions I had for you. I guess I'll open the floor up to you for a moment. Like, is there anything else you want to share? Any questions you think I should have asked you that I didn't?
I think it was quite nice chat. Maybe as a summary, I would say, if you remember just a couple of things from this chat, is ownership and going end to end. What makes you a good software engineer, ML engineer? If you want to do this in ML engineering, check out my blog, check out my course. I would be happy to chat with everyone.
We'll put links to those both in the description below. Well, thank you very much for chatting with me today then, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks again, Kyryl, for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me. I've not interviewed someone like this before, so it was a brand new experience for me. If there are any questions you think I should have asked Kyryl or that you would like to ask him, please leave a comment below, and I'll see if I can get him to answer them. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to see more interviews, please let me know. And consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. If you have any other comments, code you'd like me to review, or ideas you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment below or reach me at chris@seniorcodereviewbuddy.com. Thanks, and have a great day.